The park was alive with the sounds of childhood, the kind of sounds that softened even the hardest of hearts. The squeals of children rose with the creak of swings, laughter burst like tiny fireworks in the air, and the breeze carried with it the comforting scent of cut grass and blooming flowers. Parents watched with indulgent smiles as their little ones ran wild, free from the weight of the world. The sunlight spilled across everything in warm shades of gold, making the ordinary feel almost sacred. In the middle of all this joy sat a little girl on a swing, her dark curls bouncing as she pushed herself higher, her smile lighting up her face. Her name was Anaya. She was 7 years old, small and fragile, but with a spirit that soared far above the ground she left behind with each arc of the swing. She pumped her legs furiously, chasing the sky, her eyes bright with wonder, her laughter filling the air like music. In those moments she was weightless, fearless, untouchable, and in her innocent heart, she carried the warmth of knowing she was loved, because her father always told her she was his princess, his brave little girl who could conquer anything. But hidden within the frame of that swing was danger. One of the bolts had been tampered with, loosened deliberately, its metal twisted with unnatural force until it held by little more than a thread. It was a trap disguised as harmless play. Nobody noticed, not the parents chatting idly on benches, not the children chasing each other across the grass, not even Anaya, who was too caught up in the pure joy of rising higher and higher. The bolt groaned softly under the pressure, but the sound was lost in the chaos of the park. Then, in one heart-stopping instant, it gave way. The snap was sharp, metallic, final. The chain lurched violently, and before Anaya could even scream, the swing tilted, throwing her forward. The world spun around her, sky, earth, before she struck the ground with a thud that seemed to shake the very air. A piercing cry tore from her lips. The park froze. Laughter died mid-air. Children stopped running, their eyes widening with shock. Parents leapt to their feet, horror etched across their faces. In the rising dust lay a small figure curled into herself, clutching her hand tightly to her chest, her face twisted with pain. Tears streamed down her cheeks, carving paths through the dirt smeared across her skin. Her little voice trembled as she whimpered, broken and raw, "Papa, my hand hurts so much." The words struck like lightning. Mothers rushed forward, kneeling beside her with frantic hands, trying to comfort, trying to assess the damage. "Don't move, sweetheart," one urged. "Someone call an ambulance," another shouted. Children hid behind their parents, frightened by the sight of their playmates' tears, while others peered closer, their faces pale with worry. Fathers muttered about negligence, about rusted chains and poorly maintained swings. But Anaya lay trembling, her breathing shallow, her small wrist swelling painfully under her grip. She tried to be strong. She wanted to be strong like her father always told her, but the pain was relentless, stabbing, burning. Her lips quivered, her sobs grew weaker, and she whispered again as if into the void, "Papa." Minutes stretched into eternity. A crowd gathered, voices clashing, some panicking, some debating what to do, others frozen in useless concern. The world seemed suspended in that painful limbo until a new sound cut through the air. The low, commanding roar of an engine. Heads turned as a sleek black Rolls-Royce glided into view, its tinted windows gleaming under the sunlight, a beast of luxury out of place among the rusting playground and family sedans. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Whose car was it? What was it doing here? The question became clear the moment the license plate came into view. Anaya's tear-filled eyes widened with fragile hope. Even through her pain, recognition flickered across her face. "Papa," she whispered again, her voice a plea, a prayer, a beacon. The car door swung open, and out stepped Arjun Mehra. To the world he was a giant, one of the richest men in the country, a businessman whose name carried power and weight, whose empire stretched across industries and continents. His presence was magnetic, his reputation both feared and admired. But in that moment, none of that mattered. He was not a tycoon, not a boardroom shark, not a figure of prestige. He was a father whose world had just shattered before his eyes. His gaze fell upon his daughter, broken and weeping on the ground, and fear ripped through him like nothing he had ever known. He ran. Dust rose beneath his polished shoes, his jacket flared behind him, but he didn't care. He sprinted through the crowd, shoving past startled strangers, his focus narrowed to a single point, his daughter. His voice thundered across the park as he cried her name. Anaya. His knees hit the ground hard as he dropped beside her, but he barely noticed the pain. She turned her face toward him, her eyes glistening with tears, her lips trembling. "Papa," she whispered, her trust in him absolute even in agony. His heart cracked open. He scooped her into his arms, careful but desperate, holding her as if the world itself might try to snatch her away. His hands shook as he brushed dust from her hair, his lips pressing against her forehead. "My baby, what happened to you?" he gasped, his eyes frantic, darting to her swollen wrist, the twisted angle of her small hand. Rage flared within him, white-hot and blinding. He looked up, his voice a thunderclap. "Who let this happen?" The crowd flinched. Silence fell like a hammer. Mothers clutched their children tighter, fathers exchanged uneasy glances, nobody daring to speak. His voice rose again, sharper, louder, every word vibrating with fury. "Tell me, who is responsible for this?" The crowd shifted uncomfortably, eyes avoiding his piercing gaze. Finally, a man stammered. It broke suddenly. Arjun's head snapped toward him, his stare burning. Suddenly, his voice was sharp as a blade. "Swings do not break suddenly. Someone did this." The man faltered, his words dying in his throat. A murmur spread through the crowd. Sabotage. Tampered bolts. Someone had wanted this to happen. The whispers grew, feeding fear, feeding suspicion. Arjun's jaw clenched, his fury boiling beneath the surface. He held Anaya tighter, pressing his forehead against hers, his voice softening only for her. "Don't worry, princess. Papa won't let anyone hurt you again." Then came the wail of an ambulance siren, cutting through the air, growing louder as it approached the park. The flashing lights bathed the scene in red and blue, and the paramedics rushed forward with a stretcher. "Sir, we need to examine her hand," one said urgently. Arjun hesitated, instinct screaming to shield his daughter from every stranger. But when Anaya whimpered, "Papa, it hurts," he relented, lowering her gently onto the stretcher, though his hand never left hers. As they strapped her wrist, Arjun's eyes swept once more to the swing, to the broken chain dangling like a sinister clue. His instincts sharpened. This was no accident. This was a message. Someone had dared to target his daughter. And that was unforgivable. The ambulance doors slammed shut, muffling the murmurs of the restless crowd outside. Inside, the siren wailed, but the world felt eerily quiet. Arjun sat beside Anaya, his hand engulfing hers. She looked so small against the white sheets, her face pale, her voice weak but trusting. "Don't let them hurt me again," she whispered. His throat burned, but his reply was steady, carved in stone. "Never, my princess. No one will ever hurt you again." He brushed her hair back, kissed her temple, and whispered a promise only she could hear. "Sleep now. Let Papa fight for you." As the city lights blurred past the ambulance windows, Arjun's mind replayed the scene again and again. The tampered bolt, the man in the cap someone had seen near the swings. This wasn't random. This was deliberate. A rival, perhaps, someone who wanted to strike at him not in the boardroom but in the most vulnerable place, through his daughter. They thought they could break him. They thought they could make him weak. But all they had done was awaken something far more dangerous. His eyes hardened, his fury sharpening into resolve. Whoever had orchestrated this would pay, and pay dearly. They had touched his empire before, his wealth, his reputation. He had survived betrayal, competition, and sabotage in the ruthless world of business. But this was different. This was personal. They had dared to touch his child. And for that, no power on earth would be enough to protect them from what was coming. Anaya's hand twitched weakly in his, her small fingers curling around his palm even in sleep. He leaned down, kissed her knuckles, and whispered one last vow. "To the one who dared harm my daughter, you've unleashed a storm you cannot survive. I am not just her father. I am her shield, her protector, and I will hunt you down. When I am done, you will know the true cost of touching what is mine." The ambulance surged forward, its siren cutting through the night, carrying not just a wounded child but the birth of something far greater. A father's wrath, a vow of vengeance, and the promise of a reckoning. Because nothing in this world was more dangerous than a father who had sworn to protect his child.